My name is Violet, and I'm 32 years old. I built a tech empire worth $510 million, but my father still called me the family disgrace because I'm a single mum. At my parents' anniversary party, he screamed at me to get out while everyone watched. I simply said fine and left with dignity, but they had no idea they'd been living off my fortune for years. I closed their accounts the next day. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members who didn't appreciate your worth. Now, let me tell you what happens when you finally stop bankrolling the people who treat you like nothing. I grew up in a middle-class suburb outside of Boston where appearances meant everything. My father, Richard, was the high school principal, respected, stern, and obsessed with what others thought of our family. My mother, Margaret, was a homemaker who dedicated her life to maintaining our perfect family image. Our house wasn't large, but it was always immaculate, ready for impromptu visits from my father's colleagues or church friends. From an early age, I understood the unwritten rules. Good grades, proper behavior, appropriate friends. Any deviation from my parents' expectations was met with disappointment, lectures, and the crushing weight of what will people think. There was a script for my life: excel in school, attend a prestigious but practical college, become a doctor or lawyer, marry well, and produce well-behaved grandchildren on schedule. For many years, I played my part perfectly. I was a straight-A student, president of the science club, and volunteer at the local hospital. My parents proudly displayed my academic awards and newspaper clippings on what they called the wall of achievement in our living room. When visitors came, my father would casually direct conversations toward my accomplishments, beaming with satisfaction. My younger brother Thomas had an easier time. He was naturally inclined to follow rules and seek approval. 4 years younger than me, he watched how I navigated our parents' expectations and simply copied the formula. He joined the right clubs, befriended the children of my father's colleagues, and never questioned the path laid out for him. While we weren't close, there was a silent understanding between us about the roles we played in maintaining family harmony. Everything changed when I turned 12 and discovered computer programming. My school had just received a donation of new computers, and our teacher introduced us to basic coding. The moment I created my first program, a simple calculator that actually worked, I felt a rush of exhilaration unlike anything I'd experienced before. It wasn't just about the technology, it was about creating something from nothing, solving problems with logic and creativity. I began spending every free moment in the computer lab. I taught myself multiple programming languages, staying after school until the janitors would kindly but firmly tell me it was time to go home. At night, I read programming books under my covers with a flashlight, filling notebooks with code and ideas for software I wanted to build. When I excitedly shared my new passion with my parents, expecting them to add it to the wall of achievement, their response was tepid at best. "That's nice, Violet," my mother said with a tight smile. "But don't you think you should focus more on your biology if you want to get into medical school someday?" My father was even more dismissive. "Computers are just a tool, not a career for bright young ladies. It's fine as a hobby, but don't let it distract you from what's important." Their reaction stung, but it didn't diminish my enthusiasm. If anything, it made me more determined. For the first time, I had found something that was truly mine, not chosen to please my parents or impress their friends. I continued coding in secret, hiding my programming books inside biology textbook covers. When it came time for college applications, the tension that had been building finally erupted. I had been accepted to several prestigious universities, including my father's alma mater, Dartmouth, where he expected me to follow his footsteps. But I had also applied to MIT, known for its exceptional computer science program. When the MIT acceptance letter arrived, I couldn't contain my excitement. This was my dream, to be surrounded by people who shared my passion, who wouldn't dismiss it as just a phase. I rushed to tell my parents, letter in hand, heart pounding with anticipation. The argument that followed was unlike anything we'd experienced before. My father's face turned a deep shade of red as he paced our living room, gesturing wildly. "MIT for computer programming, we did not raise you for 16 years to throw away your potential on some fad. You're going to Dartmouth pre-med, and that's final. But Dad, this is what I love. This is what I'm good at." What you love doesn't pay the bills. Violet Medicine is a respectable career with a future. This computer nonsense will be obsolete in 5 years. When I stood my ground, he delivered the ultimatum: if you choose MIT over Dartmouth, you're on your own, not a penny from us. I thought he was bluffing. Parents didn't actually cut off their children over college choices, that was just a threat. But as the enrollment deadline approached, and I officially accepted MIT's offer, I discovered he meant every word. My parents withdrew the college fund they had been saving since my birth and redirected it to Thomas's future education. That fall, I moved into my MIT dorm with everything I owned in 2 suitcases. While my classmates received care packages and spending money from their parents, I worked 3 part-time jobs, morning shifts at a coffee shop, weekend tutoring, and late nights at the campus IT help desk. Between classes, work, and sleep, I barely had time to eat, let alone socialize. But despite the exhaustion, I had never been happier. I was finally in a place where my passion was valued, where my skills were recognized as something special. My parents' communication dwindled to occasional stiff phone calls, primarily from my mother, who would update me on Thomas's achievements while carefully avoiding asking about my studies. During holiday breaks, I couldn't afford to fly home, so I stayed in the nearly empty dorms, using the quiet time to work on personal coding projects. When summer came, I secured internships that provided housing, making the break from my family nearly complete. By my junior year, I had found my stride. My professors recognized my talent, and I secured a prestigious internship at a cybersecurity startup in Cambridge. My algorithm for detecting unusual patterns in network traffic caught the attention of the company's founders, and they offered me a part-time position during my senior year with the promise of full-time employment after graduation. I called my parents with the news, hoping that my success might bridge the gap between us. My mother sounded cautiously pleased, but my father remained unimpressed. "When you're running a real business instead of playing with computers, then we'll talk," he said, before passing the phone back to my mother. I tried to tell myself that it didn't matter, that I had found my path and their approval wasn't necessary. But deep down, the rejection still hurt. I threw myself even more intensely into my work, determined to prove him wrong. Little did I know that our already strained relationship was about to be tested in ways I couldn't imagine. My senior year at MIT should have been triumphant. I was developing a revolutionary algorithm that could detect and neutralize cyber attacks in real time, something that would later become the foundation of my company. My internship at Secure Tech, the Cambridge startup, had turned into a part-time position with an impressive salary for a college student. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly worried about making rent or choosing between textbooks and groceries. It was during a company celebration for securing their first major client that I met Jason. Tall, charming, and confident, he had recently joined Secure Tech's marketing team. While I spent my days deep in code, he moved effortlessly through the business world, translating complex technical concepts into compelling sales pitches. We were opposites in many ways. I was analytical and cautious, he was intuitive and bold. But something about his easy laugh and genuine interest in my work drew me in. Our relationship progressed quickly. For the first time, I experienced what it felt like to be prioritized by someone, to be seen as both brilliant and desirable. Jason would bring me coffee during late-night coding sessions and listen intently as I explained technical problems, even though most of it went over his head. He took me to upscale restaurants I could never have afforded on my own and introduced me to his wide circle of friends. After years of isolation and focus on academics, I was suddenly part of a vibrant social world. Looking back, there were red flags I chose to ignore. Jason's charm could quickly turn to impatience when things didn't go his way. He made subtle but cutting remarks about my practical wardrobe and lack of social graces. He talked about our future in terms of his career advancement, assuming I would follow wherever his ambitions led. But I was 23, inexperienced in relationships, and starved for affection. I mistook control for care, intensity for love. 6 months into our relationship, I discovered I was pregnant. The birth control we had been using had failed. I sat in my tiny apartment bathroom, staring at the positive test, a mixture of terror and wonder washing over me. I had never planned on having children so young, certainly not before establishing my career. But as the initial shock wore off, I found myself protective of the tiny life growing inside me. When I told Jason, his reaction was immediate and cold. "You need to take care of this," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "I'll pay for it, of course." "Take care of it," I repeated, not wanting to understand his meaning. "The abortion violet. We can't have a baby now. I'm up for the director position and you haven't even graduated. It's not even a discussion." But for me, it was a discussion. I wanted to explore options, to talk about what parenting might look like, or even adoption if we truly couldn't manage. Jason refused to engage. When I didn't immediately agree to his solution, his charming facade crumbled completely. "If you keep it, you're on your own," he said, using words eerily similar to my father's ultimatum years earlier. "I'm not ready to be a father, and I won't be forced into it. Make your choice." I made my choice. The next day, Jason's personal items disappeared from my apartment and his number was disconnected. Just like that, he vanished from my life, leaving me pregnant and alone in my final semester of college. Desperate and scared, I did what I had promised myself I would never do again. I turned to my parents for help. It had been almost 2 years since we'd spoken more than superficial pleasantries on holiday phone calls. I hoped that the news of a grandchild, while not ideally timed, might soften their hearts. I rehearsed what I would say, emphasizing my academic achievements, my job prospects, my plans for making it work as a single mother. I called on a Sunday afternoon when I knew they would both be home after church. My mother answered, her voice cautiously pleased to hear from me. We exchanged awkward small talk about the weather and Thomas's progress in his pre-med program. Then, gathering all my courage, I told them about the pregnancy. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Then I heard my father's voice in the background asking who was calling, my mother's muffled explanation, the sound of the phone being forcefully taken from her. "Is this some kind of joke?" my father demanded, his voice tight with rage. "No, Dad, I'm pregnant, almost 3 months along. I know it's not ideal timing, but I've thought about it carefully, and I'm going to raise this baby. I have a good job lined up after graduation, and I've been researching childcare options and..." He cut me off with a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a snarl. "Of course you're keeping it. You've always been selfish, always had to do things your way. Well, congratulations, Violet. You've finally done it. You've made yourself the family disgrace." The words hit me like a physical blow. Family disgrace, as if creating a life was something shameful, something dirty. "Richard," I heard my mother pleading in the background. "Don't say things you'll regret." "Regret," he shouted, not to me, but to her. "What will we tell people at church? What will my colleagues think, unmarried, pregnant, throwing away her education after everything we did for her?" "I'm not throwing away my education," I tried to explain. "I'll finish my degree. I only have 1 semester left. And the baby's not due until after graduation." But he wasn't listening. "Don't call us again," he said, his voice suddenly cold and controlled. "Don't come home. Don't involve us in the mess you've made of your life. As far as we're concerned, you've made your choices and now you can live with them. Alone." The line went dead. I called back immediately, hoping to speak with my mother to find some crack in this wall of rejection. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with tears. "Mom, please," I begged. "I need you right now. I'm scared." "You should have thought of that before." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Your father is very upset. You know how important the family's reputation is to him. Give him time to calm down. How much time this baby is coming in 6 months, ready or not?" She sighed, a sound so heavy with disappointment it made my chest ache. "I don't know, Violet. You've always pushed boundaries, always had to be different. But this? What will the neighbors think?" That was the moment I realized how fundamentally different our values were. I was worried about raising a child alone, about balancing motherhood and career, about providing stability and love. She was worried about what the neighbors would think. "Take care of yourself," she said finally, in the tone one might use for a casual acquaintance, rather than a daughter in crisis. After that call, I fell into a dark place. I considered every option, including terminating the pregnancy as Jason had demanded. But each time I thought about it, I felt a fierce protectiveness toward the life growing inside me. This baby hadn't asked to be conceived under such complicated circumstances. This baby deserved a chance, and I was determined to provide it with or without anyone's support. The following months were the hardest of my life. Morning sickness made my part-time job at Secure Tech almost impossible. My academic performance suffered as exhaustion overtook me. With just weeks left before graduation, I made the devastating decision to take a leave of absence from MIT 1 semester short of my degree. My professors were understanding, assuring me I could complete my remaining credits when I was ready. But walking away from campus, knowing I wouldn't be graduating with my class, felt like the final failure in a series of disappointments. I moved to a tiny studio apartment in a less expensive part of Cambridge, stretching my savings as far as they would go. I applied for every assistance program available and took on freelance coding projects that I could do from home. As my belly grew, so did my determination. If my parents saw me as a disgrace, if Jason saw me as an inconvenience, I would prove them all wrong. I would build a life for my child and myself that defied their low expectations. On a sweltering July day, my daughter Lily came into the world after 36 hours of labor. I had no one in the delivery room with me, just a kind nurse who held my hand during the final pushes and placed my red-faced, squalling daughter on my chest. Looking into Lily's tiny face, I made a silent promise she would never doubt her worth. She would never have to earn my love, and I would create a world for her where what will people think was never more important than what is right. The early days with Lily were a blur of exhaustion, joy, and constant worry. My tiny apartment became even smaller with the addition of a bassinet changing table and the seemingly endless supplies that babies require. I mastered the art of nursing while typing one-handed coding during nap times and in the deep hours of the night when the rest of the world slept. SecureTech had held my position for 3 months, but with no family to help with childcare and the astronomical cost of daycare in Cambridge, I made the difficult decision to resign. Instead, I took on contract work that allowed me to set my own hours. The pay was less steady, but the flexibility was essential. During those long nights rocking Lily, while troubleshooting code on my laptop, I continued developing my algorithm. What had begun as my senior project at MIT evolved into something far more sophisticated. Traditional cybersecurity measures were reactive identifying threats after they had already breached a system. My approach was different. It used machine learning to recognize patterns and anomalies in network traffic before an attack succeeded. The more data it processed, the smarter it became, creating a self-improving shield against digital threats. By Lily's first birthday, I had a working prototype and a business plan. I named my fledgling company LilyPad Security, a nod to both my daughter and the protective nature of the technology. Using my maiden name professionally, I began pitching to potential investors. Lily often strapped to my chest in a carrier during meetings. Most investors balked when they saw a young single mother with an unfinished degree. They would listen politely to my technical explanation, then ask patronizing questions about my support system and whether I had the bandwidth for entrepreneurship. One even suggested I sell him the algorithm outright so I could focus on being a mom. I left that meeting holding Lily a little tighter, my resolve strengthened rather than broken. Everything changed when I met Diane Fleming, a venture capitalist known for backing women in tech. Unlike the others, she focused entirely on the merits of my technology. She tested my prototype against her firm's security system and was impressed by its effectiveness. "This is impressive work, Violet," she said, reviewing the code. "But what really interests me is the potential for evolution. This isn't just a product. It's a new approach to security altogether." Diane became my first investor, providing enough seed funding to hire 2 engineers and rent a small office space, with a corner I set up as a play area for Lily. She also connected me with her network of industry contacts, opening doors that would have remained firmly closed to me otherwise. LilyPad Security grew steadily over the next few years. Our software caught the attention of several mid-sized tech companies concerned about data breaches. Each successful implementation led to referrals and increasingly larger clients. By the time Lily was 4, we had a team of 20 employees and a proper office in Cambridge's tech corridor. I finally completed my MIT degree, walking across the stage to receive my diploma, with Lily cheering from the audience. As the company expanded, so did the offers to acquire it. Tech giants recognized the value of our approach and the threat it posed to their own security products. The first buyout offer came when LilyPad was valued at $12 million, a sum that seemed astronomical to someone who had once counted pennies for baby formula. I declined, knowing the technology's potential was far greater. When the offers reached $50 million, then $100 million, my decision to maintain independence raised eyebrows. But I remained confident in my vision. By Lily's 6th birthday, LilyPad Security had become an industry leader with offices in Boston, San Francisco, and London. Our client list included Fortune 500 companies, financial institutions, and even government agencies. The algorithm that I had coded during late-night feedings was now protecting billions of dollars in assets and sensitive information worldwide. My personal net worth crossed into 9 figures when Lily was 7, but our lifestyle remained relatively modest. We moved from our tiny apartment to a comfortable but not ostentatious house in a good school district. Lily attended public school where I volunteered regularly. I drove a practical electric car rather than the luxury vehicles favored by most tech executives. My focus remained on building the business and raising my daughter, not on flaunting wealth. Throughout this period of tremendous success, I made occasional attempts to reconnect with my family. I sent Christmas cards with photos of Lily Mother's Day flowers and birthday gifts that went unacknowledged. I called on holidays, usually speaking briefly with my mother, while my father refused to come to the phone. The few times I managed to talk with him, he would ask if I had gotten my life together yet, as if single motherhood was a phase I would eventually outgrow. Thomas, now a medical resident, following our father's prescribed path, maintained minimal contact. He would send impersonal texts on my birthday or respond briefly to my messages about his achievements. When he became engaged to Amy, a fellow medical student from a good family, I received a wedding invitation that felt more like an obligation than a genuine desire for my presence. I attended anyway, sitting in the back of the church with 5-year-old Lily, largely ignored by my parents, who were busy basking in the glow of their son's appropriate marriage. The estrangement from my family was a constant ache, a wound that success couldn't heal. I wanted Lily to know her grandparents, to have the extended family I had grown up with, but I also recognized the toxic patterns in my parents' behavior and was determined to shield her from the conditional love and judgment I had experienced. So we built our own family of choice. Close friends, my employees who adored Lily and Diane, who had become a mentor and surrogate grandmother figure. The irony of my situation wasn't lost on me. The daughter who had been labelled a disgrace, the career path that had been dismissed as a fad, the child born out of wedlock, who was supposedly a shame to the family, all had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Meanwhile, I observed from a distance as my parents' comfortable middle-class life began to show signs of strain. Through occasional conversations with my mother and community social media, I learnt that my father had been forced into early retirement when his school district downsized. Their health insurance coverage decreased significantly, and my mother had started working part-time at a local bookstore to supplement their income. Thomas was drowning in medical school debt, and his new wife had expensive tastes that his residence salary couldn't satisfy. It was during this time that I made a decision that would later prove fateful. Despite their rejection, despite the hurt they had caused, they were still my family, Lily's family, and I had the means to help them without their knowledge. 5 years ago, while browsing real estate listings in my hometown, out of curiosity, I noticed my parents' house was listed in pre-foreclosure. The economic downturn had hit many pension funds hard, including my father's. With reduced income and rising healthcare costs, they had fallen behind on their mortgage payments. My first instinct was to call them to offer help directly, but I knew my father's pride would never allow him to accept money from the daughter he considered a disgrace. So instead, I created a solution that would preserve both their financial security and his ego. Through a shell company managed by my attorneys, I purchased their mortgage from the bank. The company then offered my parents a special refinancing opportunity due to my father's status as a distinguished educator, lowering their monthly payments to an affordable level and forgiving the missed payments as a community service gesture. My father, always susceptible to flattery regarding his career, accepted the offer without questioning why he had been singled out for such generosity. My mother wrote a tearful thank you letter to the company explaining how the new arrangement had saved their retirement. Reading her words addressed to a faceless corporation rather than her own daughter was bittersweet. That was just the beginning. When Thomas struggled to cover his final year of medical school after his scholarship funding was unexpectedly reduced, an anonymous merit scholarship appeared in his account. When my mother was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer and their insurance denied coverage for a specific treatment, a billing error mysteriously resolved the issue. When Thomas and Amy wanted to buy their first house but couldn't afford the down payment, a lucky investment in a tech stock provided exactly the amount they needed. I created an elaborate fiction about a distant relative who had passed away, leaving my parents a modest inheritance that appeared in regular installments, just enough to ease their financial stress without raising suspicion. They readily believed this story, never questioning the convenient timing or the vague details about this generous relative. Over 5 years, I had channeled nearly $2 million into supporting my family, all without their knowledge. Every time my father appeared on social media, bragging about Thomas's medical career, or my mother posted photos of family gatherings I wasn't invited to, I would authorize another anonymous gift. It was twisted, perhaps, financially supporting people who had emotionally abandoned me, but I couldn't bear to see them struggle when I had the means to help. The arrangement took an emotional toll. I spent countless nights questioning my decisions, wondering if I was enabling their rejection by solving their problems from the shadows. My therapist suggested that I was trying to buy the love and acceptance I had never received using financial support as a substitute for emotional connection. There was truth in that assessment, but there was something more as well. I wanted Lily to know her family someday. I wanted to leave the door open for reconciliation, even if it seemed unlikely. Most of all, I wanted to be the kind of person who helped family in need, regardless of how they had treated me. Not for their sake, but for my own peace of mind. As Lily grew older, she naturally became curious about her extended family. She saw friends with grandparents who doted on them, cousins to play with at family gatherings, a network of relatives who provided a sense of history and belonging. Her questions became harder to answer without revealing the full, painful truth. "Why don't Grandma and Grandpa want to see us?" she asked one night as I tucked her into bed. "Is it because I don't have a daddy?" Her innocent question broke my heart. "No, sweetie," I assured her. "It's complicated adult stuff that has nothing to do with you. They're missing out on knowing an amazing little girl, and that's their loss." But the conversation lingered with me. Lily was 9 years old now, bright, compassionate, and increasingly aware of the gap in our family circle. She deserved to know her grandparents, her uncle, her cousins. And despite everything, I still harbored hope that time might have softened my parents' stance. So when the invitation arrived for my parents' 35th wedding anniversary celebration, I saw it as an opportunity. It wasn't a warm personal invitation, just a mass-printed card, likely sent to everyone in their address book. But it was an opening, and I decided to take it. "Would you like to meet your grandparents?" I asked Lily over breakfast, showing her the invitation. Her eyes widened with excitement. "Really? Can we go? Will they like me?" "They'll love you," I said, hoping it was true. "Everyone who meets you loves you." As the date approached, I prepared us both. I bought Lily a special dress and had her practice her best manners. For myself, I chose a conservative outfit that would meet with my mother's approval and rehearsed neutral topics of conversation. I didn't mention my company's success or our comfortable lifestyle, wanting to reconnect as family first, not as financial resources. I was ready for awkwardness, for stilted conversation, even for some lingering disapproval. What I wasn't prepared for was the level of hostility that awaited us at my parents' anniversary party, or how it would ultimately change everything. The party was held at the community centre attached to my parents' church, decorated with silver balloons and flowers for the 35th anniversary theme. As Lily and I approached the entrance, I felt her small hand tighten around mine. She looked up at me with a mixture of excitement and nervousness that mirrored my own emotions. "They're going to love you," I reassured her, again smoothing a strand of her dark hair. The moment we entered, I felt the shift in the room. Conversations paused, heads turned, and a ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. My mother spotted us first, her eyes widening in surprise. She looked older than I remembered, her hair fully grey now, her face more lined. She hesitated for a moment before making her way toward us, her expression carefully neutral. "Violet," she said, her voice formal, as if greeting an acquaintance rather than her daughter. "We didn't expect you to come." "You sent an invitation," I replied simply. Her gaze dropped to Lily, who was partially hiding behind my legs, suddenly shy in the face of this strange grandmother. A flicker of something, curiosity perhaps, or even longing, crossed my mother's features. "This must be Lily," she said softly. Lily, always braver than she looked, stepped forward and extended her hand as we had practiced. "It's nice to meet you, grandmother. Thank you for inviting us to your party." My mother seemed taken aback by the small, poised person addressing her so formally. She took Lily's hand briefly, then looked back at me with a question in her eyes. "She's 9 now," I supplied. "3rd grade, top of her class in math." Before my mother could respond, my father appeared at her side. Time had not been kind to him either. His once commanding presence diminished by stooped shoulders and thinning hair, but his eyes still held the same stern judgment I remembered. "Margaret?" he said to my mother, deliberately not acknowledging me. "The Hendersons are asking for you." "Richard," she responded, a warning note in her voice. "Violet and Lily are here." He finally turned to look at us, his gaze sweeping over me dismissively before landing on Lily. For a brief moment his expression softened as he took in his granddaughter for the first time. Lily, sensing an opening, stepped forward again. "Hello, grandfather. I'm Lily. I'm 9 years old." The softness vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Margaret, the Hendersons," he repeated firmly, turning away. My mother shot me an apologetic glance before following him, leaving Lily and me standing alone in the entranceway. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I had anticipated coldness. This was for Lily's sake. She deserved the chance to form her own impressions. "Let's get some punch," I suggested, guiding her toward the refreshment table. The next hour was a study in awkward interactions. A few of my parents' friends, the kinder ones, approached to say hello and meet Lily. Others kept their distance, clearly aware of my status as the family's black sheep. Thomas and Amy arrived with their 2 children, creating another uncomfortable moment as Lily realized she had cousins she'd never met. Thomas greeted me with a stiff hug, introducing his wife and children with the formal politeness one might use for distant relatives. Amy's smile never reached her eyes as she looked between Lily and me, her expression calculating. Their children, coached in good manners, like all the Harrington offspring, shook hands with Lily, but quickly ran off to play with friends they already knew, leaving her alone again. I overheard Amy asking Thomas in a staged whisper, "Is she still, single?" with a meaningful glance in my direction, as if single motherhood were a contagious condition. Throughout the event, my mother made sporadic efforts to include us, bringing over different guests for brief, superficial introductions. My father remained on the opposite side of the room, holding court with his former colleagues, pointedly ignoring our presence. I caught him once, though, watching Lily when he thought no one was looking, a complicated expression on his face. The breaking point came during the meal. The guests were seated at round tables with a head table for my parents, Thomas's family, and a few close relatives. My mother had placed Lily and me at a table near the back with distant cousins and church acquaintances. As the servers brought out plates of food, I noticed that they were skipping our table. My Aunt Lisa, my mother's sister, who had always been kinder than most, noticed too. "Excuse me," she called to one of the servers. "This table hasn't been served." The young man looked confused. "I was told to serve the marked tables first," he explained, showing her his list. "Our table was not on it." Lisa frowned and marched off, presumably to sort out the mistake. A few minutes later, my mother hurried over, looking flustered. "There's been a confusion with the caterer," she said quietly. "They prepared for fewer guests than we confirmed." Before I could respond, my father appeared behind her, his face flushed from either wine or anger. "There's no confusion," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "I told them exactly how many meals to prepare for family members." The implication hung in the air. My Aunt Lisa, who had returned with the server, looked appalled. "Richard, what are you saying Violet and Lily are family?" "Are they?" he replied, his voice rising further. "The daughter who rejected everything we taught her, who brought shame to our name, who shows up after years of absence expecting to be welcomed like nothing happened." People were staring now. Lily pressed against me, her eyes wide with confusion and hurt. I placed a protective arm around her shoulders. "Dad," I said quietly, trying to diffuse the situation. "This isn't the place for this discussion. We can talk privately later." "There's nothing to discuss," he snapped. "I only ordered for family," he added with a pointed look at my empty place setting. My Aunt Lisa was indignant. "Richard, for heaven's sake, she's your daughter and this is your granddaughter. What is wrong with you?" My father's face darkened. "What's wrong with me? I'll tell you what's wrong. Having to explain to everyone in our community why my daughter decided to become an unwed mother and disgrace the family name. Having to see the pity in people's eyes when they ask about her. That's what's wrong." "Okay." I stood up slowly, keeping Lily close. "We should go," I said to her gently. "That's right." My father continued, his voice rising with each word. "Run away just like you always do when things get difficult. Get out, you piece of trash. Take your illegitimate child and get out of my house." The room fell completely silent. Lily began to cry, silent tears streaming down her face as she pressed against me. Something inside me broke open. Not just hurt, but a deep cleansing anger that had been suppressed for too long. "Fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Come on, Lily. We don't need to stay where we're not wanted." I took her hand and walked toward the exit, my head held high despite the tears threatening to spill over. As we passed my father, I paused for just a moment. "I hope that maintaining your precious reputation is worth losing your daughter and granddaughter," I said quietly, "because after today you won't have to worry about us embarrassing you again." We left amid the uncomfortable murmurs of the guests, the sound of my mother calling my name, and Thomas's conspicuous silence. In the car, I held Lily while she cried, assuring her that nothing was her fault, that some adults just couldn't see past their own prejudices, that she was perfect exactly as she was. But inside, something had fundamentally changed. The last thread of hope for reconciliation had snapped, and with it, the last reason for my secret financial support. They had made their choice publicly and definitively, and now I would make mine. After I tucked Lily into bed that night, I sat alone in my home office, staring out the window at the Boston skyline. She had finally fallen asleep after many reassurances that she was loved, that family was about more than blood, that the people who chose to be in our lives were the ones who mattered most. Her innocent questions, "Why doesn't grandfather like me?" and "What did we do wrong?" had pierced my heart. No child should feel rejected for simply existing. As the city lights blurred through my tears, I made my decision. I opened my laptop and began systematically dismantling the financial web I had created to support my family without their knowledge. First, I contacted my attorney to dissolve the shell company that held my parents' mortgage. Starting next month, their payments would return to the original amount, far more than they could afford on my father's pension and my mother's part-time job. Next, I cancelled the automatic deposits to their inheritance account. The monthly transfers that had covered their property taxes, insurance, and medical expenses would stop immediately. I removed them as beneficiaries from the trust fund I had established, which they believed was a retirement investment that had performed surprisingly well over the years. I cancelled the premium health insurance policy I had been paying for reverting them to the basic coverage provided by my father's pension plan, coverage that had significant gaps, especially for my mother's ongoing cancer screenings. The credit cards issued under my corporate account, which they thought were standard retirement benefit cards, would stop working the next time they tried to use them. The tuition assistance for Thomas's children's private school would cease before the next semester's payment was due. With each keystroke, each phone call, each email to financial institutions and service providers, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and liberation. For 5 years, I had been enabling a family that didn't want me supporting people who couldn't even offer basic kindness to my daughter. I had been buying the illusion of family connections, hoping that someday they might see past their prejudices and recognize the successful, loving mother I had become, despite their abandonment. But that hope had died tonight, crushed under my father's public rejection. What remained was the clear-eyed realization that I owed them nothing. Not financial support, not continued attempts at reconciliation, not even the protection of my silence about their dependence on the daughter they despised. As I completed the final transactions, a notification appeared on my phone, a voicemail from my brother Thomas. Curious, I played it on speaker. "Violet, it's Thomas. What happened tonight was... I don't have words. Dad was completely out of line. Mum's upset, but you know how she is. She won't go against him. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not that it means much now. Anyway, call me back if you want to talk." His voice sounded genuinely regretful, but there was a noticeable absence in his message. He hadn't stood up for me at the party. He hadn't introduced his children to their cousin. He hadn't challenged our father's behaviour in the moment when it might have made a difference. His private apology meant little after his public silence. I didn't call him back that night. Instead, I sent a brief text. "Thank you for the apology, but it's too little too late. I've protected all of you for years, but after tonight, you're on your own." He responded almost immediately. "Protected us? What are you talking about?" I didn't answer. He would find out soon enough. For the first time in years, I slept deeply that night, the weight of secret obligation finally lifted from my shoulders. The hurt remained. Perhaps it always would, but now it was accompanied by a sense of completion, of circles closing. I had given my family every opportunity to be part of my life, to know their granddaughter and niece. They had rejected those opportunities repeatedly, and now finally I was accepting their decision. In the morning, I made Lily her favourite breakfast, blueberry pancakes shaped like animals, and told her we were going on an adventure. We spent the day at the Museum of Science, then shopping for new books, followed by ice cream in the park. With each smile, each laugh, each moment of simple joy, the sting of the previous night receded a little further. That evening, as we built an elaborate pillow fort in the living room and watched movies inside it, my phone began buzzing incessantly. First Thomas, then my mother, then even my father. I silenced it without checking the messages. Whatever financial crisis had finally alerted them to their changed circumstances would have to wait. Tonight was for healing, for reinforcing the truth that Lily and I were a complete family on our own. The next morning, I finally listened to the frantic voicemails. The mortgage company had contacted my parents about their reversion to the original payment terms. The health insurance company had notified them of cancelled coverage. The private school had called Thomas about outstanding tuition. The credit cards had been declined while my mother was grocery shopping, leaving her embarrassed and confused. Thomas's message was the most revealing. "Violet, what's going on? Mom and Dad's house payment suddenly doubled, their cards aren't working, and somehow our tuition assistance got cancelled. Dad's freaking out. He says it's some kind of identity theft or banking error, but it all happened at once. Do you know anything about this? Please call me." I did call him then, ready to reveal what they had never suspected. But as the phone rang, I felt no triumph, no vindictive pleasure, only sadness for what could have been, what should have been between us. "Thomas," I said when he answered on the first ring, "we need to talk." "Thank God you called back," he replied, his voice strained. "Everything's falling apart here. Dad's on the phone with the bank, Mum's in tears, Amy's parents are having to lend us money for the kids' tuition. What's happening? Do you know something?" I took a deep breath. I know everything, Thomas. I'm not just aware of what's happening. I'm the one who made it happen. Silence then. What are you talking about? For the past 5 years, I've been financially supporting our family without anyone knowing. The special refinancing on Mum and Dad's mortgage. That was me. The mysterious inheritance me. The billing error that covered Mum's cancer treatment. The merit scholarship that paid your final year of med school. The lucky investment that funded your house down payment. All me. His breathing was the only sound for several seconds. That's not possible. You're a single mum. You work in IT support or something. I actually laughed at that. Is that what they told you? That I'm some kind of secretary? Thomas, I own LilyPad Security. I founded it. I'm the CEO. It's worth over $500 million. $500 million? He stammered. But how, when, why didn't you tell us? Would it have made a difference? I asked. Would Dad have been proud of me then? Would he have accepted Lily? Or would he have just seen dollar signs instead of the family disgrace? Another long pause. Why are you telling me this now? Because after last night, I've stopped all financial support. The mortgage will revert to its original terms. The credit cards are cancelled. The health insurance supplement's gone. The tuition assistance ended. You're all on your own now, just like I was when I got pregnant and Dad threw me away. Violet, you can't do this, Thomas protested, panic edging into his voice. Dad's pension barely covers their basic expenses. My residency salary isn't enough for 2 kids in private school. Mum needs those cancer screenings. I can't do this, I repeated, a sharp edge entering my tone. I've been doing exactly this for 5 years, Thomas. Supporting a family that didn't want me. Protecting people who couldn't even treat my daughter with basic kindness. What I can't do anymore is pretend that money can buy the acceptance that should have been freely given. Look, what Dad did was terrible, I admit that, but punishing all of us, punishing Mum, punishing my kids, that's not fair. Fair, the word hung between us. Was it fair when none of you stood up for me last night? When Dad called me trash in front of everyone and you sat silently? When your children weren't even introduced to their cousin? Don't talk to me about fair, Thomas. I've been more than fair for years. I heard muffled voices in the background, then Thomas speaking away from the phone. No, Dad, wait. Before he could finish, my father's voice came booming through the line. What have you done? He demanded. Some kind of revenge scheme, hacking our accounts. I'll have you arrested for this. It's not hacking when you own the accounts, Dad, I replied calmly. Every mortgage payment, every credit card bill, every tuition check. They all came from me. From the daughter you called a disgrace. From the unwed mother you were so ashamed of. That's not possible, he sputtered, echoing Thomas's earlier disbelief. The company that holds your mortgage owned by me. The special refinancing that saved you from foreclosure. That was me choosing to help you despite how you treated me. The inheritance from a distant relative. That was me too. Every financial miracle your family has experienced in the past 5 years came from the daughter you rejected. His breathing became laboured, and for a moment I worried I had pushed him too far. Then my mother's voice came on the line, trembling but clear. Violet, is this true? Yes, Mum, all of it. But how, when we last spoke, you were struggling? You hadn't even finished college. I built something from nothing, Mum. I created a successful technology company while raising Lily on my own. The kind of company that makes the national news. The kind that provides security software to banks and government agencies. The kind that made me wealthy beyond anything you could imagine. And you've been helping us all this time without saying anything, her voice broke. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have accepted my help if you knew? Would Dad's pride have allowed it? I wanted to be part of your lives, but you made it clear that wasn't possible unless I fit your narrow definition of success. So I helped from a distance, hoping someday things might change. And now you're taking it all away, my father said back on the line, his voice strangely subdued. Yes, I confirmed. After last night, I realized nothing will ever change. You will never see me as anything but a disappointment no matter what I achieve. You will never accept Lily as your granddaughter, and I'm done pretending that's okay. You can't just cut us off, he protested, but the imperious tone that had characterized our interactions for decades was missing. Your mother needs her treatments. Thomas's children. I supported all of you when I had nothing, I interrupted. When I was pregnant and alone, when I was building my company with a baby on my hip, when I was working 20-hour days to make ends meet. I reached out over and over, only to be rejected every time. And still I helped. But last night you crossed a line when you publicly humiliated my daughter. No amount of money can fix that. There was a long silence broken only by what sounded like my mother crying softly in the background. Finally my father spoke again, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. What do you want from us? It was the first time in my adult life that he had asked me what I wanted rather than telling me what I should want. The question caught me off guard. I want what I've always wanted. I answered honestly. A family that accepts me for who I am, not who they wish I was. I want Lily to know her grandparents and her cousins. I want to stop hiding my success out of fear it will make you feel inferior or resentful. I want respect, not just tolerance. And if we give you that, you'll restore the financial arrangements. There was a calculating edge to his question that made my heart sink. No, Dad. That's not how this works. You don't get to pretend to accept me because you need my money. Real acceptance comes first without conditions. Then we can discuss how family supports each other, emotionally and if necessary financially. I heard him start to argue, but then Thomas took the phone back. Violet. This is a lot to process. Can we talk more about this in person, maybe without Mom and Dad present at first? I considered his request. Thomas had never been openly hostile like our father, but he had also never been my champion. Still, he was reaching out, and that was more than had happened in years. All right, I agreed. Tomorrow afternoon at the Common. Bring your wife and kids if you want. Lily should meet her cousins properly. As I ended the call, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. The satisfaction of finally being honest was tempered by sadness for the years of deception and distance. I had no illusions that one conversation would heal decades of dysfunction, or that my father would suddenly transform into the supportive parent I had always longed for. But perhaps this crack in the facade, this moment of vulnerability, could be the beginning of something more authentic between us. Whether that new relationship included financial support remained to be seen. What was clear was that any future help would come with full knowledge of its source and with the respect that had been sorely lacking until now. As I set down my phone, Lily peeked into my office. Are you okay, Mum? You look sad. I smiled at her, this perceptive child who had been the catalyst for so much growth and change in my life. I'm okay, sweetie. Actually, I think I'm better than okay. How would you like to meet your cousins tomorrow? Her eyes lit up with excitement, reminding me that despite all the adult complications, children still saw potential for connection, where adults saw only barriers. Perhaps through Lily there was hope for our family yet. 3 months of silence followed my conversation with Thomas. Our meeting at the Boston Common had gone reasonably well. His children and Lily had played together cautiously at first, then with increasing animation as the afternoon progressed. Thomas's wife Amy had been stiffly polite, clearly struggling to reconcile her previous dismissal of me with the revelation of my financial status. Thomas himself had alternated between apologizing for the past and anxiously inquiring about the future. I just don't understand why you kept it all secret, he had said as we watched the children on the playground. You could have told us about your success. Would it have made a difference in how you saw me, I asked? Or would Dad have just found a way to take credit for it, to claim that his strict parenting made me successful despite my poor choices? Thomas didn't answer directly, which was answer enough. I learned through our conversation that my parents were indeed struggling. The return to their original mortgage payment had stretched their budget to breaking point. My father had been forced to take a part-time job as a night security guard at a local office building, a humbling experience for a man who had once been addressed as Principal Harrington by an entire community. My mother had increased her hours at the bookstore despite her doctor's recommendation to reduce stress during her cancer treatment follow-ups. Thomas and Amy had withdrawn their children from private school, unable to afford the tuition without my anonymous assistance. They were living with Amy's parents temporarily while trying to sell their house, which they could no longer afford. I listened to these updates with mixed emotions. I hadn't wanted to cause hardship, especially for my mother and Thomas's children, who were innocent in all this. But I also recognized that they were experiencing only a fraction of the struggle I had faced as a young single mother with no support system. What are you going to do? Thomas asked finally. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But whatever happens next needs to be built on truth, not deception, on both sides. After our meeting, weeks passed with no communication from my parents. I assumed they were still processing the revelations about my financial status and their own unwitting dependence on me. Or perhaps my father's pride was still too wounded to initiate contact. Either way, I focused on my company and Lily refusing to make the first move this time. Then on a crisp October morning, I received the news that my father had suffered a heart attack. The call came from my mother, her voice thin and frightened as she explained that he had collapsed while working his night shift. He was stable, but would require bypass surgery. The doctors say the stress of the past few months likely contributed, she said, the unspoken accusation hanging between us. He's asking for you, Violet. We'll be there in an hour, I told her. Lily was apprehensive about visiting the grandfather who had been so cold to her, but she understood the seriousness of the situation. Even when people are mean, we still care if they're sick, right? Mom? She asked as we drove to the hospital. Right, sweetie, I agreed, touched by her compassion. And sometimes when people are scared or sick, they realize what's truly important. The hospital room was dimly lit when we arrived. My father looked smaller, somehow diminished by the illness and the machinery surrounding him. My mother sat beside him, her face lined with worry and exhaustion. Thomas was there too, standing awkwardly by the window. When my father saw me, an expression I couldn't quite interpret crossed his face. Not anger, not exactly resentment, but something closer to shame. Violet, he said, his voice hoarse. And Lily, you came. Of course we came, I replied, guiding Lily forward. That's what family does. He winced at the word family, perhaps remembering his declaration at the anniversary party that we weren't part of his. Lily approached the bed cautiously, her natural empathy overcoming her apprehension. I'm sorry you're sick, grandfather, she said solemnly. Mom says you need an operation to fix your heart. That's right. He replied, something softening in his expression as he looked at her properly for perhaps the first time. The doctors are going to help me. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. There were so many things that needed to be said, so many hurts that needed to be addressed, but this wasn't the time or place for all of it. Still, something needed to change if we were going to move forward. Dad? I said finally, I think we need to talk. Not about everything, that can wait until you're stronger, but about what happens now. He nodded slightly, then looked pointedly at Lily. Understanding my mother offered to take her to the cafeteria for ice cream. Thomas excused himself as well, leaving me alone with my father for the first time in years. The doctors say I need to reduce stress, he began awkwardly. Financial worry is apparently bad for heart patients. I almost laughed at his oblique approach. Even now he couldn't directly ask for help. I imagine it is. I agreed, waiting. He sighed, looking older than his 68 years. Violet, I've been wrong. About many things. About you. About Lily. It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, it was unprecedented. The company you built, Thomas showed me articles about it, about you. Forbes called you one of the most influential women in tech. You did all that while raising Lily alone. Gee, I nodded, feeling strangely moved by his acknowledgement of my achievements. I didn't want to believe it at first, he continued, that you had been supporting us all these years. It seemed impossible. But then I remembered how determined you always were, even as a child, how you never gave up once you set your mind to something. He paused, his breathing laboured. I poured him a cup of water from the bedside pitcher, helping him take small sips. Thank you, he said, and I knew he wasn't just referring to the water. Violet, I don't have the right to ask anything of you. What I said at the anniversary party, there's no excuse for it. But your mother doesn't deserve to suffer because of my pride. And Thomas's children. I'm not interested in punishing innocent people, Dad, I interrupted gently. I never was. I just couldn't keep enabling a relationship where I was valued only for what I could provide, not for who I am. He nodded slowly. I understand that now. Or I'm trying to. He hesitated, then asked, what would it take for us to start again? It was the question I had been waiting years to hear. Not what would it take to restore financial support, but what would it take to rebuild our relationship? Respect, I said simply. For me, for my choices, for my achievements. Acceptance of Lily as your granddaughter. Not with tolerance, but with love. And family therapy. All of us working together to understand how we got here, and how to create something healthier. He looked like he might argue with the therapy suggestion, but then seemed to think better of it. And if we do these things, Then we'll figure out the rest together as a family, including how I can help with your medical bills and mum's treatment. But the relationship comes first this time, not the money. My father reached for my hand, a gesture so unexpected I almost pulled away. His palm was papery and cool against mine, reminding me of his mortality and the limited time we had to make things right. I would like to know my granddaughter, he said quietly, and I would like my daughter back, if she's willing. It wasn't everything I had hoped for, not yet. There would need to be more explicit apologies, more concrete changes in behavior, more honest conversations about the past. But it was a beginning born from crisis, but genuine nonetheless. She's willing, I replied, squeezing his hand gently. We'll take it one day at a time. When my mother and Lily returned from the cafeteria, they found us talking quietly about Lily's school and my company's latest projects. The tension that had defined our interactions for so long had eased, replaced by a cautious openness that felt like the first breath after being underwater. My father's recovery from surgery was slow but steady. During his convalescence, our family began the even slower process of healing emotional wounds. We started therapy, individually and as a family, with a counsellor specialising in estrangement and reconciliation. The sessions were often difficult, reopening old hurts and revealing patterns none of us had fully recognised. My father struggled the most with the process, his generational resistance to airing family business, clashing with the therapist's insistence on honesty. But his heart attack had shaken him deeply, forcing him to confront not just his mortality, but the consequences of his rigid expectations and conditional love. My mother, freed somewhat from his domineering influence during his recovery, began forming her own relationship with Lily. They discovered a shared love of books, spending hours at the library together, or baking recipes they found in old cookbooks. Watching them together, I caught glimpses of the grandmother she might have been all along if given the chance. Thomas and I rebuilt our connection more easily, the childhood closeness we had once shared providing a foundation. His children became regular visitors at our home, forming cousin bonds with Lily that grew stronger with each playdate. Even Amy softened over time, especially after I helped her find a position at a prestigious medical practice when she decided to return to work. As for the financial situation, I took a measured approach. Rather than resuming the secretive support of the past, I established clear, transparent arrangements. I covered my parents' medical expenses and created a proper retirement fund for them. I helped Thomas and Amy sell their too-large house and find a comfortable home they could genuinely afford. I set up education trusts for all the grandchildren, including any future additions to the family. My father initially bristled at the explicit nature of these arrangements, preferring the fiction that had allowed him to maintain his pride. But our therapist encouraged us to practice radical honesty, acknowledging both my ability to provide financial support and his need to accept it graciously. A year after his heart attack, we gathered for a proper family dinner. Not a public event like the anniversary party, but an intimate meal in my home. As I looked around the table at my mother helping Lily with her napkin, my father engaged in surprisingly animated conversation with my new partner Michael, and Thomas's family engaged in typical dinner chaos. I felt a sense of completion that financial success alone had never provided. The path to this moment had been longer and more painful than it should have been. There were still tender spots moments when old patterns threatened to re-emerge. But we were all trying, all growing, all choosing connection over pride or resentment. As for me, I had finally learned that wealth couldn't buy acceptance, and that standing up for myself wasn't selfish, but necessary. The little girl who had sought her father's approval, the young woman who had hidden her achievements to avoid threatening his ego, the successful entrepreneur who had anonymously supported a family that rejected her. All these versions of myself had led to who I was now. A woman who knew her worth, who set healthy boundaries, and who understood that true family is built on mutual respect, not obligation or financial dependence. When my father raised his glass in a toast that evening, his words captured how far we had all come. To second chances, he said, looking directly at me, and to a daughter brave enough to teach her father what truly matters. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who didn't see your true worth? How did you balance setting boundaries with leaving the door open for reconciliation? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe, to hear more real-life journeys and share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in family struggles. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes saying fine and walking away is the first step toward building something better.